Before exploring some of the history of Lift Every Voice and Sing, as well as its beauty and importance, I want to offer some framing comments. First, I know the harm a white person can cause by misunderstanding and appropriating Black culture. I hope to avoid this by speaking with humility and by relying on the wisdom of Black friends, colleagues, and scholars, particularly Imani Perry, author of May We Forever Stand, A History of the Black National Anthem. Second, though today I focus on the experience of Black Americans, all anti-oppression work has to include acknowledging that the land that I live on was once occupied by members of numerous tribes, including the Piscataway, Nanticoke, Mattaponi, Chickahominy, Monacan, and Powhatan. These people and their descendants deserve respect and repair. Third, though I represent a non-theist community, I don't have time today to critique the theistic elements of Lift Every Voice. I'll just offer that the song's lyricist, James Weldon Johnson, said that he was an agnostic. But his song, as well as the Black liberation movement in general, is deeply intertwined historically with Black churches. Finally, our understanding of Lift Every Voice and Sing evolves along with our ever-changing social context. As jazz musician Jason Moran put it, it's a piece that doesn't sit still, and in that way defines it as a brilliant composition. I hope my words today contribute to our efforts to repair the harm done by racism. Now, no single work can define an artist, but Lift Every Voice and Sing dominates the careers of James Weldon Johnson, who wrote the lyrics, and John Rosamond Johnson, who wrote the music. The older brother, James Weldon, also attained fame as an author, educator, lawyer, diplomat, and activist. Both were known as race men. Race men, meaning, as Imani Perry explains, that, quote, the work they did was not pursued for mere personal achievement or acclaim. Race men and women understood that each accomplishment was meaningful for the aspirations of the race as a whole. Their identity was inseparable from their race, in other words. They grew up in Jacksonville in the late 19th century when it was the largest city in Florida. Though over half the residents were African American, Jim Crow racism dominated. Black people turned to each other to build a Black middle class, businesses, newspapers, and schools. It was one school, the all-Black Stanton School, that asked the Johnson brothers to produce something for their celebration of Abraham Lincoln. When John Weldon Johnson wrote the lyrics depicting ancestral struggle and resilience, he wept, recounting, I could not keep back the tears and made no effort to do so. From the moment 500 school children first sang the song publicly on February 12th, 1900, tears have continued to flow. A year after the performance, a startling reminder of racism forced the Johnsons to move. A fire in a mattress factory spread through their Jacksonville neighborhood of La Villa. James Weldon recalled people fleeing Black-owned businesses and homes as the fire department focused on protecting white neighborhoods. 8 hours later, over 2,000 buildings were destroyed and 10,000 residents, mostly Black people, were homeless. Many of them, including the Johnsons, decided to start a new life up north. So the brothers settled in New York City, and it's here that this song and ethical culture history overlap ever so slightly. As John Rosamond advanced in his career in musical composition, he searched for a school for his daughter, Mildred. He chose the only integrated schools he could find, the Progressive Ethical Culture School and its affiliated high school, Fieldston. After graduating, Mildred entered the Ethical Culture Teachers Training Program. Her uncle, James Weldon, already a successful writer, was appointed a U.S. consul in Venezuela and Nicaragua between 1906 and 1913. Then he spent some years in journalism, and then was appointed executive secretary of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the first Black person to serve as its operating officer. NAACP leadership had primarily been white, and Johnson's appointment was part of the organization's shift to Black leadership. Ethical culture was a part of the founding of the NAACP. The year before Johnson took the position at the organization, it adopted Lift Every Voice as its official song. After serving the NAACP, James Weldon became the first African-American professor at New York University, and he later taught at Fisk University. According to James Weldon's biographer, Noel Morissette, at his 1938 funeral, one of the pallbearers was a leader of the New York Society for Ethical Culture, John Lovejoy Elliott. James Weldon was probably a member of the society. A membership card for him was found in society archives. Let me turn briefly to the words and music of this song. It begins with a clear call to action to sing out, and we'll sing it at the end of my talk, but for now I invite you to read the words along with me. They dramatically describe perseverance through suffering. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith of the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out of the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, let our hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. I invite you to take a deep breath and pause and let those words sink in. John Rosamond Johnson rose to the challenge of setting these dramatic lyrics to music. One musicologist said that the melody is a word painting, where the music clearly matches the meaning of the words. The opening line, lift every voice, rises up in scale, conveying hope. Each verse begins in A-flat major, which is a key popular in gospel music, but it switches to an ominous minor key when describing the dark past and treading through the blood of the slaughtered. Amani Perry says that the song moves the spirit from high to low, from hope to despair, rising again, upward with each word, depicting the aspirations of Black America. Now, when the Johnson brothers were in New York, they didn't realize that the song spread from school to school through Florida. By 1903, it had reached Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where it was part of the Emancipation Day program. After the NAACP adopted the song, it was published and distributed nationally, and soon people in predominantly white institutions like New York's Little Red Schoolhouse began singing it. But James Weldon seemed most touched by how it served Black communities. He wrote that, quote, the lines of this song repay me in elation, almost of exquisite anguish, whenever I hear them sung by Negro children. Finding the words pasted in the hymnals of Sunday schools and the YMCAs and led him to declare, nothing I have done has paid me back so fully as being part creator of this song. During the 30s and 40s, the song spread internationally, showing up in places like South America and Japan. In the 1960s, as cities began electing more and more Black mayors, it became a staple for municipal events. It was used to honor Black historical heroes like Absalom Jones, Richard Allen, Pauli Murray. Today, it's used to celebrate Emancipation Day, Juneteenth, May Day, the birthday of Frederick Douglass. Baltimore's Morgan State Choir opens every concert with it. And today you can find it in 30 different Christian hymnals and in churches serving Black and white communities. Even the famed Mormon Tabernacle Choir performed it. In 2012, after the murder of Trayvon Martin, students at Howard University gathered to sing Lift Every Voice. When Barack Obama was first elected president, the Reverend Joseph Lowery, who co-founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Martin Luther King, gave the benediction at Obama's inauguration. And he began with words from the song, God of our weary years, God of our silent tears. And I'm sure many witnessing the event teared up as well. Lowery asked God for help so that we can all, quote, work for the day when Black will not be asked to get in the back, when brown can stick around, when yellow will be mellow, when the red man can get ahead, man, and when white will embrace what is right. I cried at that inauguration day, but out of joy and hope. And some of my Black friends were thrilled with Obama's election, but were more pessimistic, and with good reason. I mean, through Obama's administration and into Trump's, systemic racism continued on with mass incarceration, poverty, police violence. Police killings continued to kill unarmed Black people. Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice in 2014. 2015, Philip White, Freddie Gray. 2016, Terrence Crutcher. 2017, Chad Robertson. 2018, Stephen Clark. 2019, Elijah McClain. Last year, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and more. According to Southern Poverty Law Center, from Obama's election, right afterwards, hate groups grew at unprecedented rates. White supremacists stepped more boldly into public life. Neo-Nazi Richard Spencer organized the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. After Trump's comments about good people on both sides, Spencer accelerated his speaking tour. On October 19th of 2017, when Spencer spoke at the University of Florida, the university's carillon played Lift Every Voice. That led me to reach out to the Biden Inauguration Committee and the Senate Committee on Rules and Administration that oversees inauguration planning. And I suggested that they have the song played on another carillon that sits on Capitol Hill, the memorial to my grandfather, Senator Robert Taft. I mean, my family connection, it's not going to work. It's too late, too many details. But I thought it would be a wonderful tribute to the struggle for racial justice if Lift Every Voice rang out on that inauguration day, where a fortnight earlier rioters waved Confederate flags. I mean, I thought about my grandfather last week when the mob broke into our most hallowed political institution. Though he was a conservative, Robert Taft consistently supported civil rights, equitable education funding, anti-lynching legislation. He opposed the KKK, poll taxes, segregation in the military. He was a leader of a Republican Party that would have condemned, not encouraged, those who paraded through the Capitol with Confederate flags. You may have seen a photo that I'd like to share now of a trespasser carrying a Confederate flag past two portraits of senators. John C. Calhoun on the left, one of the most racist legislators ever, and Charles Sumner, an anti-slavery activist, on the right. On May 22nd, in 1856, Sumner was assaulted by a pro-slavery representative and nearly beaten to death for 20 minutes on the floor of the Senate. Sumner was permanently disabled, requiring 3 years of convalescence before returning to the Senate chamber. A century and a half later, people died in that same Capitol building due to violence fueled by racism. So I thought it would be great if Lift Every Voice rang out over Capitol Hill on Inauguration Day as a sign of racial solidarity. But given our heated political climate, I wondered, would it be too provocative? Would it be too divisive? It doesn't take much to spark white backlash. I mean, after all, taking a knee during our national anthem to protest racially biased police killing got Colin Kaepernick banished from the NFL. Of course, this year, the NFL played Lift Every Voice alongside the national anthem before games. It seemed more like a corporate-driven profit strategy. And I wonder, did it help unite or did it divide us more? So I wondered, could playing Lift Every Voice on the Taft Carillon incite a group of extremists to riot again? This tension between division and unity in symbols was evident in conversations about Lift Every Voice a century ago. Soon after the song became famous, it was clear that there was no consensus, even in the Black community, about it, especially whether it should be called a Black National Anthem. No one knows who first described it that way, but references to that are found in the 1910s. When the NAACP adopted it in 1919, it insisted it was a hymn, not an anthem. On June 19th, 1926, the Baltimore African American newspaper criticized the term Negro National Anthem. First, it said that it made no sense to call it that because, quote, there are only two independent sovereign nations of African origin. They are the republics of Haiti and Liberia, and they probably won't replace the existing anthems they have with this song. The editorial went on to reject Black nationalism in general, concluding that no separate Black anthem nor flag would be needed. Quote, we need neither. We are American citizens. It doesn't surprise me that some Black leaders already marginalized by racism would want to avoid seeming unpatriotic. Many Black citizens wanted to prove their patriotism and served in the military and died in battle. According to Timothy Askew, a professor at Clark Atlanta University, many African Americans were saying, well, if we marched and we attained what we hoped would be equality, we can't have a Black national anthem. We need an anthem that links us all together. The most hostile condemnations of Lift Every Voice came from anti-communists of the time. Prominent labor historian Walter Dakin wrote that this Negro national anthem fosters, quote, Negro ethnocentrism and divisive racial biases, moralizations, and rationalizations. Where did Black loyalty lie, he asked, with their nation or with their race or with radicalism? Amani Perry points out that in the March 1939, the Associated Negro Press reported that Lift Every Voice was under attack as proof of Communist Party influence. Now, while the Red Scare subsided, debates about patriotism continue. Up to today, in 2008, singer Renee Marie was criticized for being unpatriotic and divisive when she substituted the words of the Star-Spangled Banner with the words of Lift Every Voice at a municipal event in Denver. But Beyonce got good press when she sang it at a mainly white-attended Coachella Music Festival. Professor Askew wrote that, quote, it's the label of the song as the Black National Anthem that creates a lot of confusion and tension. And in a book that he wrote about the song, he explains that, quote, to sing the Black National Anthem suggests that Black people are separatists and want to have their own nation. And he continued with this powerful twist. Quote, this means that everything Martin Luther King Jr. believed about being one nation gets thrown out the window. African-American conservative blogger Kenneth Durden also appropriated King's legacy to condemn the song. He said, quote, King always appealed to the American dream for all. He was a patriot and he never wanted Blacks to deny or separate themselves from being American. I think claiming an anthem for ourselves as Black people is doing just that. Askew added a critique that was typical of conservatism. Quote, who has the right to decide for all Black people what racial symbol they should have? Identity should be developed by the individual himself, not a group of people who think that they know what's best for you. This is complicated. As a white person, I'm just trying to learn. But I didn't ask for a militaristic national anthem. But I end up singing along sometimes, although less recently. I did learn that James Weldon Johnson often implied that this was a song of national unity. In response to that Baltimore Afro-American editorial criticizing the song's supposed separatism, Johnson wrote, "There is nothing in Lift Every Voice and Sing to conflict in the slightest degree with the Star-Spangled Banner or My Country 'Tis of Thee or other patriotic song. It is fully as patriotic," end quote. And for good measure, Johnson pointed out that the Star-Spangled Banner is boastful and bloodthirsty, while Lift Every Voice is more elevated in spirit. And, quote, "My brother's music is better." Other times, James Weldon called it, quote, "a hymn for Negro people." But, as many have pointed out, the song doesn't contain specific reference to race or ethnicity. Besides, as history professor Martina Will points out, Lift Every Voice ends with "true to our native land." And for most of the people who sing it, regardless of race, that means the USA. Professor Will suggested that it, quote, "evokes patriotism while recognizing the hybrid identity of many African Americans' experience." That term, hybrid identity, reminds me of W.E.B. Du Bois's description of how Black Americans are seen by white culture, on the one hand as Americans, and on the other hand as outsiders. For Du Bois, it cut his soul in two. For many Black Americans, the struggle to be whole and to be included is both personal and social. It's central to a book of fiction that James Weldon wrote entitled The Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man. Its protagonist, a young biracial man of pale complexion, decides to pass as white to escape the prejudice and lynching that threatens his existence. He is trapped, unable to, quote, "disclaim the Black race nor claim the white race." And some saw the character as relegated to mediocrity and obscurity because they were unable to risk revealing their racial background. Maybe the Johnson brothers understood that their song would suffer the same fate of so many Black Americans, neither fully accepted as part of a unified nation, nor respected as separate or distinct creators of Black culture. As I move on towards my conclusion, it's clear that this song can unite and divide at the same time. That paradox is woven into a nation that simultaneously virtuously proclaimed ideals and savagely oppressed an entire race. The Johnson brothers reflected this beauty and ugliness woven throughout US history. Every time the song is sung, that same paradox arises. And that's a paradox that I wrestle with. As Robert Edwin can attest, I went back and forth with him over who, when, and in what spirit should Lift Every Voice and Sing be sung. Rhoda Malwood Lee, who's a white Episcopal minister, wrote about how familiarity with the song breaks down along racial lines. And she was struck by how when singing the words, "Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod," she knows that, quote, "some in the congregation are descended from people who trod the stony road of slavery on towards emancipation through the blood of the slaughtered, while others' ancestors held those people in slavery." For Lee, given the continued police killings and economic racism, the beauty and challenge of the song brings tears. She says that they're not so much tears of mourning of the past as tears of shame for the present. But she says, quote, "they're also tears of wonder. Wonder at the grace of her Black congregants who sing the song in white spaces that don't fully embrace anti-racism." In my own struggle to confront and deconstruct systemic racism, I've shed tears of shame, but I want to move past that. Shame can be so unproductive. Tears need not be unproductive, especially when they are tears of wonder. Tears can bring transcendence and hope and positive change. Amani Perry writes of Maya Angelou's 8th grade graduation at Lafayette School, a school for Black children. Graduation was a big deal for the community. In the middle of the ceremony, a white politician, Mr. Donlevy, interrupted the speech with a speech of his own, reminding those assembled of their lowly status. Then he simply walked out. Angelou wrote of this moment, quote, "To my left and right, the proud graduating class of 1940 had dropped their heads. We were maids and farmers, handymen and washerwomen, and anything higher that we aspired to was farcical and presumptuous. The man's dead words fell like bricks around the auditorium, and too many settled in my belly." End quote. With grace to the rescue came student Henry Reed with his valedictory speech, followed by an impromptu, nearly spoken rendition of Lift Every Voice. In that moment, as Perry describes it, quote, "The Negro National Anthem was a tool of transcendence. It was a tool for community building. It was remembered by Angelou as reflecting the very spirit of Black resilience," end quote. Sadly, such resilience continues to be required. UCLA professor Shauna Redmond wrote that, quote, "Black communities across the globe continue to be vulnerable in very unique and unsettling ways. To sing this song is to revive that past, but also to recognize, as the lyrics of the song reveal, that there is a hopeful future that may come of it," end quote. Am I naive to think that we are slowly creating a future that redefines race, power, and patriotism? Another contemporary critic, Keith Cartwright, interprets this song's patriotism as belonging to, quote, "a utopian space built of the stuff of Black experience here on these shores, but reaching for something or somewhere else where freedom would truly be possible." In this way, the song is both challenging and emotionally uplifting. It's a song of tears and transcendence. Amani Perry wrote about when her family was grieving the death of her grandmother. Quote, "She was my family's guiding force. Sadness lingered. Spontaneously, I asked my son to share the song he'd been learning in school. He stood and began to sing. Before he finished the first line, everyone in my mother's generation stood up with him and raised their right arms with solid Black power fists. His eyes widened like saucers, and mine filled with tears." In 1926, the Pittsburgh Courier added how tears can bring comfort along with that transcendence. I'll end with this. Quote, "When the chords about the heart are strung to the breaking point, sing. Sing your cares away. Soon the chords will begin to loosen and tears may fall, soothing the spirit like spring showers." Thank you.